4:30 we started.
We interrupt that package. Here's the NTSB press conference we've been promising you out of Philadelphia on that fatal crash. Let's listen in.
So we delayed it so that we could report that information to you. We've interviewed 3 crew members today, and I want to point out, I'm going to recapture some of the things that they have said, but I want to point out that these crew members have been traumatized through this accident that they were in, and they've not fully recovered from their injuries. We did interview the engineer today. Has been widely reported he's 32 years old. He had his FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, required physical just last month. Our investigators found the engineer to be extremely cooperative. He was accompanied by his lawyer, which is not at all unusual. And the engineer encouraged us to contact him again, if we needed anything else. So again, we found him to be extremely cooperative. He recalls ringing the train bell as he went through the North Philadelphia station. That's not a normal station stop for him, but he's required by regulations to sound his bell. I may have said horn. He's required to sound his bell as he goes through past a station stop, and he did that. He recalled doing that. But he has no recollection of anything past that. He felt fully qualified and comfortable with his equipment, and he reported no problems with his train handling. And when asked, he demonstrated a very good knowledge of very good working knowledge of the territory, speed limitations, things like that. He began his railroad career while he was in college as a brakeman. He started with Amtrak in 2006 as a conductor, and in 2010 he became a locomotive engineer. Since 2012 he has worked out of New York City, and he's been on this particular job for several weeks. He works at 5 days a week. It's an out and back trip for him. Goes New York, Washington, and back to New York 5 days a week. He said that he did not feel fatigued, nor did he report any illness. As we reported the other day, the train has 3 conductors. The conductor is not able to be interviewed as he is still in the hospital. However, we did interview the 2 assistant conductors. I'll call it assistant conductor number 1. She's 39 years old. She was hired by Amtrak in 2011. And she was in the 4th car, which is the cafe car. She stated that before departing Washington, the entire crew conducted a safety briefing where they went over all of the speed restrictions along their intended route. She reported that it was a normal run through Philadelphia. Everything was normal up through Philadelphia. And she said she could hear the transmission of the locomotive engineers. The conductors carry radios, and they are frequently talking to and listening to the locomotive engineer. So she could hear the transmissions from the locomotive engineer. She reported that approximately 3 to 4 minutes after departing Philadelphia, she said she heard the engineer talking to a SEPTA engineer. She recalled that the SEPTA engineer had reported to the train dispatcher that he had either been hit by a rock or shot at, and that the SEPTA engineer said that he had a broken windshield and he placed his train into emergency stop. She also believed that she heard the engineer say something about, she also believed that she heard her engineer say something about his train being struck by something. This is her recollection, and certainly we're going to be conducting further investigation of this comment. Our investigation has not independently confirmed this information, but we have seen damage to the left-hand lower portion of the Amtrak windshield that we have asked the FBI to come in and look at for us. We oftentimes rely on the FBI for their technical expertise in such areas, and they will be there tonight looking at this particular damage to the Amtrak locomotive windshield. Of course, when the engine went through the impact, the windshield was shattered, but there's particular damage there that we want them to look at for us. We've secured the track image recorder, by the way, from the SEPTA train to see what we can learn from that. Now, moving forward, right after she recalled hearing this conversation between the engineer and her engineer and SEPTA engineer, she said that she felt rumbling and her train leaned over and her car went over on its side. She said they were not able to self-evacuate, and they waited for the emergency responders to get them out. She said she had about 15 passengers in her car. We asked what her working relationship was with her locomotive engineer. She said that she had worked with him a good bit and said that he was great to work with. She said he was always offering to help her with her job. Now let's move to the assistant conductor number 2. He's 35 years old. He was hired by Amtrak in May of last year, just a few days before the accident. He had celebrated his 1-year anniversary with Amtrak. He was in the 7th passenger car. That, of course, is the last passenger car, and he reported having about 40 people in his car. Up to the accident, he reported no problems other than some radio problems with his portable radio. He said that sporadically he could hear, but not sure that some of his transmissions were going out. At the point that we're describing at the location of the accident, he said he felt shaking, then 2 major impacts. He said that interior seats disconnected, and he attempted to contact the Amtrak dispatch center, but does not recall receiving a response. He assisted with the evacuation of injured passengers until he was instructed by emergency responders to go seek medical attention on his own. He said he had not worked much with the Amtrak engineer for the accident trip, but he did say that he was happy with the engineer and described the engineer as being very professional. So what we've just described is the information that allowed us to delay the press conference so that we could report that information to you. We've got some other investigative activities that will fill you in on what's been going on. We've mentioned through the week a 3D laser scanner. We have done a 3D laser scanning of the locomotive interior and exterior. We've scanned an exemplar passenger car so that we can compare the exemplar passenger car to the damaged cars. And we've also documented interior safety features in all cars. We'll continue. We've continued the testing of the signals and the signal circuitry. Basically, as the tracks are being rebuilt, our signal specialists are going along to check the continuity of the signal circuitry. Over the weekend, we plan to reassemble the train set as much as we can to put it put it back together, connect the brake lines, and conduct a brake test, and that will take several days. Over the course of the last few days, some of you have asked, well, what would we do if we could not talk to the engineer, and how would we resolve it? And one of the things we've called for in the wake of a fatal train crash in 2008 where 25 people were killed, including the engineer, the NTSB issued recommendations for forward-facing image recorders and inward-facing image recorders. So something that would get a video and audio image of what's going on inside the locomotive cab, as well as the outward-facing cameras. And of course, this train did have an outward-facing camera. We also feel it's important to have the inward-facing cameras. The FRA, that recommendation was issued in 2010 when we completed our investigation of that accident out in Chatsworth, California. And the FRA has replied that they do intend to act upon that recommendation. There's a lot to be done. I think over the last few days we've gotten a lot done. But this will be our final press briefing on scene. Future information on this accident will be coming from our press office in Washington, D.C. And in just a moment, I'll ask Peter to explain that process. But basically, I think you can follow us at our webpage, www.ntsb.gov, and also follow us at Twitter. I think you know our Twitter handle is @NTSB. I want to emphasize that even though this is the final press briefing, certainly there is a lot of work that needs to be done and will be done over the next several days while our investigative team is here in Philadelphia. There's a lot that needs to be done and will be done. But anyway, that's the end of my prepared remarks. And if you would, please raise your hand. I'll call on you and identify your outlet. Yes, ma'am.
Live coverage on News Channel 8. You've been watching NTSB spokesman Robert Sumwalt giving a final update from Philadelphia on the fatal Amtrak crash. Today's news includes information on the 32-year-old engineer of that train, Brandon Bastian. He's told investigators that he didn't feel fatigue or illness at the time of the high-speed derailment. However, the engineer has lawyered up, but the NTSB says he's been cooperating. Meantime, it was just revealed that another Amtrak worker aboard that train said she heard reports that another train engineer had complained that either a bullet or a rock hit his train along the same corridor where the accident happened. It's too soon to connect any dots of this one unusual aspect of the investigation. Meantime, the NTSB says it has interviewed other personnel on the train that derailed, and their investigation is ongoing. Brake tests will be conducted next.